Robert had always known that his family's land was more than just property. It was a living testament to the sacrifices his ancestors made and the dreams they pursued. His great-grandfather James had purchased the 80 acres in 1920 after working 3 jobs to scrape together the money. A man who had never known wealth, James understood the value of land more than anyone. To him, this land wasn't just an investment, it was a legacy that would be passed down for generations. Robert's grandfather worked the soil, raising crops, and his father had spent long hours maintaining the property, building fences, and caring for the farm animals. Now Robert, the last in the line, stood on the porch of his aging house, watching the horizon stretch before him. He felt the weight of his great-grandfather's decision every day. This wasn't just his home, it was the foundation of everything his family had ever worked for. But little did Robert know this land, which had always been a source of pride, would soon become the very thing that would challenge everything he thought he knew about his family's future. One crisp autumn morning, Robert was enjoying his coffee on the back porch when he heard a strange noise. At first he thought it was thunder, but the sound grew louder. Curiosity led him to the ridge that overlooked his land. As he approached, his stomach dropped. There in the distance were 3 massive bulldozers, their metal jaws tearing through the earth, clearing the land in the eastern part of his property. Surveyors were marking boundaries, placing stakes in a perfect grid pattern. A sense of dread washed over him as he jogged down toward the workers, demanding to know what was happening. The woman in a tailored blue suit, who appeared to be overseeing the operation, gave him a cold, dismissive glance, and before explaining that this land had been approved for development, Robert felt his heart racing as she told him that his property had been classified as abandoned and sold to the developers for a new housing project. His voice trembled with disbelief as he introduced himself, explaining that this land had been in his family for over 100 years, but she wasn't listening. Her response was curt and final. Our paperwork says differently, sir. We have all the necessary permits. This development is happening. Robert was stunned. How could this be happening? He had never been informed that anything was amiss. The woman, Jessica Mells, showed him the paperwork on her tablet, and Robert's blood ran cold. The map she displayed showed his land divided with nearly 30 acres marked as abandoned and ready for development. The more he looked at the map, the more his world seemed to slip away. The land that had been in his family for generations was now marked as vacant, and according to the documents, Westview HOA had every legal right to proceed. His mind raced, trying to process what he was hearing. There must be some mistake, he said, voice trembling. I have the original deed at home. This land has been in the family for decades. Jessica's smile remained tight, and she simply said, Mr. Harrington, I'm sorry. According to our records, this is not your property. If you have concerns, contact our legal department, but I warn you, we have a team of 15 attorneys who specialize in property law. The cold finality of her words hit Robert like a punch to the gut. That evening, Robert sat alone in his kitchen, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. How could this be happening? This land had been the heart of his family's history, filled with memories of laugh after hard work and love. He thought about his grandfather planting apple trees, his father fixing fences on stormy nights, and his own childhood running through the fields. The thought of bulldozers tearing through that land was unbearable. It felt like the very essence of his family's history was being erased, as if someone was stealing not just the land, but the very memories that were built into it. The emotional toll was too much to bear. Robert was furious, confused, and helpless. All at once he wanted to fight, but the legal system seemed so distant and intimidating. How could he stand against a powerful corporation with a team of attorneys? This wasn't just a battle over land, it was a battle for his family's legacy, and Robert knew he had to find a way to fight for it the next morning. Robert did something he never thought he'd have to do. He went to the local courthouse. He spoke with the county clerk, hoping for some kind of help or guidance, but all he received was a cold, impersonal response. The property lines were adjusted last year during a regional survey. Notices were sent to the affected parties, the clerk told them, offering no explanation as to why Robert hadn't received anything. She suggested that his mail might have been lost in the shuffle. Frustration noted at Robert's insides as he made the rounds, speaking to building inspectors and county officials. Everyone told them the same thing: the permits were in order, the development had been approved, and there was nothing that could be done. But Robert wasn't ready to give up just yet. He called 3 different property attorneys, hoping for a glimmer of hope. Each one gave him the same answer: West View's legal team was ruthless, and fighting them would mean years of expensive litigation with no guarantee of success. Robert stood at the edge of his property, watching his bulldozers cleared away what had been his family's land for generations. He felt as though the ground beneath him was slipping away. Robert was at a crossroads. Every option he had considered seemed to lead to dead ends. But then he remembered something his father had told him when he was a child: the deed to our land has protections. Robert, your great-grandfather was paranoid about developers try and steal it, so he built safeguards into it. Robert's heart skipped a beat. He remembered the old oak chest in the attic where his family stored important documents. That night he pulled out the yellow deed carefully, reading the words that had been passed down through generations. Hours passed as he combed through the dense legal language, searching for anything that could give him a way out. Finally, after 3 cups of coffee and a tense silence, he found it: a hidden clause in the deed that would change everything. The clause was buried deep in the legal text, written in a way that was almost impossible to understand at first glance. But as Robert read it again, it became clear. The clause stated that if anyone were to construct improvements upon the land without express written consent from the deed holder, those improvements would automatically become the property of the rightful owner. Robert's hands shook as he reread the provision. His great-grandfather had foreseen a time when developers might try to steal the land, and he had taken steps to protect it. This was no ordinary deed. It was a trap, one that would catch anyone who tried to take what wasn't theirs. And now Robert realized he was the one who had the power to turn the tables on Westview. He wasn't just defending his land, he was holding a legal trump card that could make the entire development company's project crumble. Robert knew he had to act fast, but first he needed confirmation. He called an elderly lawyer, Thomas Green, who had been a friend of his father. Thomas, who had decades of experience, took one look at the deed and was amazed. "This is extraordinary," he said. "Your great-grandfather was a brilliant man. This provision was properly recorded with the county and remains legally binding. Every structure Westview builds on your land becomes your property." Automatically, Robert's heart raced as he realized the full scope of what this meant. All 156 homes Westview was building would eventually belong to him. He could stop them now, or he could wait and let them finish their construction. The more homes they built, the bigger their mistake would become. The idea of waiting, however, was difficult, but Robert knew that if he acted too soon, they could just walk away with some construction costs. If he waited, he could claim every single home. It was a decision that would require patience and careful planning for the next few days. Robert paced the floors of his home, weighing his options. His mind kept coming back to the same question: how long could he wait? Every day the bulldozers worked and new homes took shape. The pressure was mounting, but Robert also realized that he had something that very few people ever had. In such a situation, time. He had the luxury of waiting, and while it was emotionally exhausting, Robert understood that sometimes the best course of action was to let things unfold. He spent hours thinking about his great-grandfather's wisdom. The man had fought for this land with everything he had. Robert couldn't dishonor that legacy by rushing into a decision that might not be the best one. Patience was his weapon now, and he had to trust in the process as weeks passed and construction on the home's move forward. Robert began to notice that more and more homes were nearing completion. The developers seemed confident. Jessica, the HOA representative, frequently waved at him from the construction site as if daring him to challenge her authority. Robert saw the houses taking shape, beautiful homes with manicured lawns, fancy driveways, and new residents moving. And the emotional toll on him grew. How could he possibly stand by and let families move into homes they didn't own? He couldn't stop thinking about the innocent people who would be hurt in the process, but each day he weighted the value of the homes rose, and so did the stakes. Robert couldn't let his emotions cloud his judgment. He had a responsibility to protect his family's legacy, and sometimes doing the right thing required waiting for the perfect moment in the end. Robert made the difficult decision to wait. The construction continued, and with each passing day, more homes were built on his land. But Robert didn't just sit idly by. He documented everything: photos, videos, and detailed logs of the construction. He hired an independent surveyor to verify the land boundaries, and he kept meticulous records of every interaction with the developers. His patience was paying off slowly but surely. He was amassing evidence that would be crucial in the future. He watched as the neighborhood began to take shape, filled with homes and families. It was a surreal experience for Robert, watching something that belonged to him being transformed into a community. But he knew the end game was drawing near. The months that followed were some of the hardest of Robert's life. Every day he saw the homes go up. He saw families move and decorate their homes and start new lives. He heard the laughter of children playing in the yards that had once been his family's land. But with each new home, Robert's resolve strengthened. He knew that all of this would soon be his. His patience was about to pay off in a way that was beyond anything he could have imagined. The quiet victory of waiting, the slow build-up of his case was about to unfold in a way that would change everything. Finally, the day came when Robert could no longer wait. At the community's grand opening ceremony, as the mayor, developers, and homeowners gathered to celebrate the completion of the neighborhood, Robert walked in, holding his great-grandfather's original deed. He stepped forward and interrupted the event, causing a stir among the attendees. "This land is mine," Robert declared, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "All 156 homes you've built are on land that belongs to my family." The crowd went silent as Robert revealed the legal provision that had been buried in the deed for decades. The developers tried to deny his claim, but the evidence was irrefutable. Silence fell over the crowd as the realization of the situation hit everyone at once. The aftermath was chaotic. Homeowners were left in shock. The developers scrambled to contain the situation, and the media quickly picked up on the story. As Robert had suspected, the developers' legal team couldn't fight the validity of the provision in the deed. The homes, the amenities, and everything Westview had built were now legally his property. But Robert's moral dilemma wasn't over. He had to decide whether to evict the homeowners who were now living in homes they had thought they owned. But Robert, understanding the weight of the situation, chose to do the right thing. He wouldn't punish innocent families for the greed of a corporation. Instead, he made sure they wouldn't lose their homes. In the end, Robert was able to negotiate a settlement with the developers, securing $48 million in compensation. But instead of hoarding the money, he used it to help others. He created affordable housing in a nearby neighborhood, ensuring that families who had struggled to find homes could now live in comfort. Robert also opened the community amenities to the public, providing access to a pool, tennis courts, and a clubhouse for everyone. He used his newfound wealth to build a foundation that would benefit his community for years to come. Through this journey, Robert learned a valuable lesson: patience, while often difficult, can lead to the sweetest victories. Sometimes the greatest revenge is not destroying your enemies, but transforming their greed into something that benefits others. By protecting his family's legacy, Robert had not only secured his future, but had made a meaningful difference in his community.